In this video, we're going to explore the strange and troubling fascination Adolf Hitler had with ancient Sparta. The Nazi regime looked to history to legitimize their brutal policies and justify their vision of a racially pure, militaristic state. Of all the historical societies, Hitler admired Sparta the most for its ruthless focus on warfare, racial purity, and strict societal hierarchy. But why exactly was Hitler obsessed with Sparta? What aspects of Spartan society did he seek to emulate in Nazi Germany? And how did this ancient Greek city-state shape one of the most destructive ideologies in modern history? Let's dive deep into this dark chapter of historical obsession. The Spartan ideal Sparta, located in southern Greece, was one of the most powerful city-states in the ancient world. What set it apart was its rigorous military culture. Every aspect of Spartan life was designed to support its army. Spartan boys were taken from their families at the age of 7 to be trained as warriors, enduring harsh discipline, hunger, and physical punishment. The Spartans believed in survival of the fittest, often abandoning weak or sick infants to die, a practice that appealed to Nazi ideals of racial purity. Hitler saw this kind of merciless training and selection process as something to aspire to. He famously said that the ancient Spartans were the highest racial ideal of antiquity. In Mein Kampf, Hitler praised the Spartans for their ruthless culling of the weak, claiming that their strength lay in their willingness to sacrifice individuals for the good of the state. This idea of eliminating those deemed unfit became a horrifying pillar of Nazi ideology, manifesting in the T4 euthanasia program and later the Holocaust. Sparta and the Nazi youth movement. One of the most explicit ways in which Hitler's admiration for Sparta manifested was through the Nazi youth programs, particularly the Hitler Youth. Modeled after Spartan practices, the Hitler Youth was designed to train young Germans to become fierce, obedient soldiers for the Third Reich. Much like the Spartan Agog, the state-run training for boys, the Hitler Youth emphasized physical endurance, loyalty to the state, and military training from a young age. Hitler believed that by indoctrinating children early, he could create an entire generation of Spartans for the 20th century. The Hitler Youth were expected to endure physical hardships, much like the Spartan boys, and were taught to value strength, aggression, and racial superiority above all else. Spartan racial purity and the Nazi Aryan ideal. One of the most sinister ways Hitler's obsession with Sparta influenced Nazi ideology was through the concept of racial purity. Sparta was notorious for its strict control over its citizen population and the rigid division between Spartans and their slaves, the Helots. Spartans lived in constant fear of a Helot uprising and enforced brutal subjugation to maintain control. The Spartans considered themselves racially superior to the Helots, whom they viewed as an inferior class. Hitler and the Nazis saw a parallel between the Spartans and the so-called Aryan race. The Nazis believed that the Aryan race was the purest and most superior, and that it was their duty to protect this purity from inferior races, just as the Spartans had with the Helots. Nazi propaganda frequently invoked Sparta as a model of racial separation and domination, where the superior ruled over the inferior without mercy. This obsession with racial purity led to some of the darkest chapters of human history. The Nazis implemented racial laws, such as the Nuremberg laws, which aimed to prevent the mixing of Aryan Germans with Jews, Roma, and other groups they considered inferior. The Spartans' brutal treatment of the Helots was often cited as a justification for the Nazis' own racial policies. The Spartan militarism and Nazi expansionism. Sparta was a society completely devoted to warfare. It was a state where the needs of the military dictated every aspect of life. Hitler admired this and sought to recreate a similarly militaristic state in Germany. In fact, he often referred to Nazi Germany as a Spartan state. The entire Nazi regime was geared toward preparing for and waging war. The Spartan principle of might makes right resonated deeply with Hitler's worldview. Sparta's constant military campaigns and its ability to maintain a warrior class for centuries appealed to Hitler's own vision for Nazi Germany's expansionist goals. He believed that Germany, under the Nazi banner, should conquer and subjugate its neighbors, much as the Spartans had done in ancient Greece. This desire for Lebensraum, living space, was a key part of Nazi foreign policy, and it directly led to the invasions of Poland, France, and the Soviet Union. Sparta's militaristic focus also inspired the SS, Hitler's elite paramilitary organization. The SS were envisioned as a new warrior class, loyal only to Hitler and the Nazi state, much like the Spartan warriors who lived only to serve their city-state. The reality behind the myth. While Hitler admired Sparta's militarism and racial hierarchy, he overlooked the significant flaws in Spartan society. For one, Sparta was a deeply insular and stagnant society. Its obsessive focus on military discipline came at the expense of cultural and intellectual growth. Unlike Athens, which produced great philosophers, artists, and democratic ideals, Sparta left behind few cultural achievements. This irony is striking, as Nazi Germany, which saw itself as culturally superior, borrowed from a society that produced little in the way of lasting intellectual or artistic legacy. Moreover, Sparta's rigid societal structure eventually led to its downfall. Its population of full-fledged citizens dwindled over time, while its dependence on the Helots made it vulnerable to internal unrest. By the time of its defeat by Thebes in 371 BCE, Sparta was a shadow of its former self. This collapse serves as a stark contrast to the image of eternal strength that Hitler admired. Conclusion: a distorted legacy. Hitler's obsession with Sparta reveals much about the ideological underpinnings of the Nazi regime. He admired the Spartans not for their cultural achievements, but for their brutal militarism, racial hierarchy, and suppression of the weak. In Sparta, Hitler found a historical model that seemed to justify his own vision of a racially pure, authoritarian state. However, like Sparta, the Third Reich was ultimately doomed to collapse. The very values that Hitler admired, militarism, racial purity, and suppression, led to his regime's downfall. The myth of Sparta as a perfect society, much like the myth of Aryan supremacy, was built on a foundation of violence and exclusion that could not last. By examining this dark fascination with Sparta, we can better understand the historical manipulations that fueled one of the most destructive ideologies of the 20th century.